great thing that you do here is even if he's a womanizer, even if he's a putz, even if he's a really nasty guy who does the wrong thing half the time, he's lovely. I mean, you care about him anyway, as his wife does, played by Rosamund Pike.
Yeah, no, Miriam, the character that Rosamund plays, seems to see something in him that other people maybe don't see, and seems to ground him in some way, where he's comfortable being his crazy self, and she's okay with him being his crazy self. You know, he has a real sympathy with sort of wounded people around him. That first wife, his buddy Boogie, even his father. He has, you know, there's this kind of, he has great sympathy for these sort of damaged people around him, and he is underneath it, a pretty decent guy in some ways. You know.
Well, substance abuse doesn't do him any good.
No, he's self-destructive as hell. He's absolutely incredibly self-destructive.
And then, I mean, the thing about it is that it's all very, there's like one layer after another loaded onto it's just bursting at the seams.
Yeah, it's a big story. Yeah.
It must have been difficult to contain.
I think it was difficult to contain. You know, I mean, they had to winnow it down in a lot of ways. There was lots of, you know, it has lots of life in it. That was, I think, difficult to contain.
That's what's good about it.
It is what's good about it. It's what was appealing about it, and it's what hopefully still comes across in it. But you know, it would have been a 5-hour movie. You know, if we'd let everything go the way it was supposed to go, it would have been an endlessly huge movie.
But you're able to be very funny in it, and also, you know, there at the end, as you say, there's some tragedy. So as an actor, you really had a lot of juice.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of juice in it. There's a huge range of stuff you get to do. And he is funny. I mean, you know, and part of his appeal is that, you know, he says these nasty, funny things that I think most people wish they could actually. I mean, I think some people really would like to be able to call up their ex-wives' new husband and give him a heart attack on the phone. You know, I mean, it's like, who wouldn't like to actually do that sometime? So there's an appeal in the guy just being that, you know, the person who's doing what we'd all like to do. You know.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's at his cost doing that kind of thing.
No, the thing about it is that you recognize the guy. You've seen him.
Totally.
You know, you know people like him.
Sure.
Not at that sort of degree.
No, I've known some people pretty close to that. I know some people pretty close to that, but most of them are actors, so they're allowed to. They're given some license to behave like that.
Well,
unfortunately,
the other person that you have a great deal of fun with in the movie, who's just wonderful, is Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah.
Did you ever work with him before?
I was in a movie with him called Confidence, an okay sort of crime movie that was, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. But I didn't actually do anything with him in the movie, but I got to know him a little bit on the set of that. So I knew him already a little bit.
Yeah, is he someone you admire?
Oh, sure, absolutely. No, totally. I've always really admired him and really admired... I've always loved how out there he'll go. I mean, when I was a little kid, I was absolutely obsessed with Papillon and the character he plays in that movie. And the fact that he would do that kind of thing, you know, he would wear those crazy glasses and be very physical with what he does and make big, wild choices like that. Yeah, I always really liked it.
Or Midnight Cowboy.
Or Midnight Cowboy, or any number of things. I mean, Little Big Man and stuff like that. I mean, he's just amazing in those things. Great movies. But he has a lot of balls as an actor, so it's great.
Well, what was it like, you know, putting the scenes together with him, the two of you sort of going back and forth?
Well, he has his own way of doing things, you know, and it's a case-by-case thing. Sometimes it was just very straightforward, but sometimes he's really searching around to try and get his footing in the scene or feel like the whole thing isn't gelling quite right. And in those cases, he can go, he doesn't do violence to the script. I mean, he plays around with it, and he will...
He used to have a screenwriter with him.
Did he really? He went around with a screenwriter? Somebody to rewrite stuff for him? That's interesting. You can see that he would, you know, he has a lot of things in this movie that are sort of monologues, where he's just going. And those would often be the thing where he would take he would rip it apart and kind of try to search out how it would fit together. And it's interesting because he didn't change anything ever. It always came back to exactly as it was written. But he would mess around with it for a while until he could... So it was almost like he was doing a little rewriting of it, but then he would figure it out, and then it would go back to what it was supposed to be.
I think his name was Maurice Shiskel.
Maurice Shiskel? I've heard of Maurice Shiskel.
Whether that's still true,
that guy definitely wasn't around on this.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, he'll rip the thing apart for a while. but it's great to work with.
But would it go on for long takes?
Depended. Yeah, depended. You know, in a lot of ways, he's rehearsing on camera. You know, and
That's expensive.
It's expensive. It sure is expensive, but you know, it was worth it with him. And you know, he wasn't. I don't have a feeling he would have done it if he had had. Well, I don't know. Maybe he would have if he'd had a bigger part. But yeah, it's expensive. Yep. I don't think he gives a shit, which is fine.
No,
you know, he doesn't give a shit. He's going to get it right. So, yeah, which is great.
I hope he didn't give you any ideas.
No, I don't think I have a completely different. I'm much more pedestrian in the way I work and stuff. I mean, it takes a lot more. It's just a different thing. You know, I think a lot of guys of his generation, those actors, they do a lot more of that sort of stuff that I'm much more pedestrian about how I do it. I'm too concerned about. I want to go home too, so I don't want it to.
You have a family, right?
Yeah, I just like to go home. You know, I like to go home.
But you live in New York, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about, Tom Hooper, of course, is getting a lot of attention right now for the King's Speech. Have you had a chance to see it?
I have not.
Because you worked with him on John Adams, which I very much admired.
Thank you.
Now, was that a satisfying or grueling experience for you to work with him? And I heard that he was very demanding.
Yeah, he is. But I think for that kind of project, you actually... Yeah, there you go. I think for that kind of thing in particular, that big crazy thing, you need a guy who's a bit of a hard ass and demanding, because otherwise the thing just won't get done. So you know, it's just too big. You have to have somebody who's going to be really demanding. It was ultimately satisfying, but the actual experience of it was pretty grueling. Not because of him. I mean, it was just the size of it and the scope of it.